about 10 days out from the election night victory for Donald Trump and the victory for Dave McCormick, to be honest, Bob Casey, who's been in the Senate for 18 years, living as a Nepo baby his entire life, is basically not conceding the election, despite being down by many thousands of votes. He will still beg for a recount, and this election will not technically be over until November 26th. Now, let's see what his cope is for that.
Hi everybody, it's Bob Casey. My priority has always been standing up for the people of Pennsylvania. Across our Commonwealth, close to 7 million people cast their votes in a free and fair election. Our county election officials will finish counting those votes just like they do in every election.
Okay, but listen up, Bob. First of all, what's up with the lisp? Does anybody else pick up on that, or am I just a jerk? Secondly, they're going to count the votes just like every other state. Well, remind me, what is the situation? Is it that Florida is a small state that counted everything on election night, or is Florida actually a bigger state than Pennsylvania easily and counted millions and millions of ballots within a few hours versus, again, a state like Pennsylvania where apparently the guy won't concede 10 days away from the election victory for Dave McCormick? Now, just for a vibe check, we see that Dave McCormick already won the Senate seat, in my opinion, and by most people's opinion, with common sense. You'll see that the Senate has a Dave McCormick lead of about 0.3 percentage points, and if you recall, last week it was Dave McCormick up by about a point. Now, here, if you look at it, you'll see that Bob Casey's behind by about 22,000 ballots, with 98% of the vote already counted. Now, the remaining votes are provisional and military ballots. Now, the remainder obviously are going to be more slanted, just common sense wise, to be more Republican than not. Military ballots, if you look at the military, they vote majority Republican easily almost every time in every state. That being said, of course, Bob Casey is somehow begging the question of let's do a recount. Let's waste thousands, if not millions, of Pennsylvania state dollars, taxpayer funds, to do a recount to inevitably probably end up with a result where Dave McCormick, instead of winning by, let's say, 20,000, will win by 18,500 votes. I mean, to be honest, these recounts that don't do any sort of auditing, signature verification, just retabulating the same paper, those ballots will be 99.98% accurate. These sort of recounts hardly make a difference at all. Okay, I mean, you look at Abe Hamadeh in 2022. He lost, I presume, by less than 1,000. They did a recount. He still lost officially. Well, his deficit shored up a few hundred votes, but that was less than 1,000 overall for a margin of loss for Abe Hamadeh 2 years ago. Dave McCormick is presumed to have been in position to lose these 22,000 he's ahead. That's just not going to happen for Bob Casey. It's not happening. But he's still going to lie to y'all. But let's see what he says.
The American democratic process was born in Pennsylvania, and that process will play out. I want to thank the election workers across our Commonwealth who've been working diligently over this weekend. Their work will ensure Pennsylvanians' voices are heard.
Okay, first of all, super creepy voice. I cannot let it go, folks. But seriously, this sort of fake praise for people, and then he's the one that's issuing and trying to go for a recount. So how much do you really appreciate the ballot workers when they give you a result that you don't like, and so therefore you're like, oh, totally, I appreciate you guys, but can you recount it again? Oh, and all of the irony, okay? This guy, Bob Casey, on his soapbox for 4 years straight. Oh, Donald Trump denied the election, okay? And you can have a legitimate, oh, wow, okay, that you got us in that one. Let's say you give him that. Okay, but what is this sort of lack of conceding? In fact, Carrie Lake basically is less of a Karen about this election cycle with Ruben Gallego than Casey is in Pennsylvania. Now, granted, if I were the son of a former governor who definitely is more liked than I am, and I'm some 60-year-old guy with a lisp, I'd be pretty embarrassed if I lost in a Trump election. Okay, I would be too. So maybe I would be grasping at straws, but because I'm not, I get to make fun of him for it. Now, folks, the reason why it's so pathetic is because if you look at 2018, the guy clearly was a pretty big electoral juggernaut. I mean, he beat Lou Barletta, the Republican, 6 years ago by the order of magnitude of about 600,000 ballots. You look here, the margin of victory was about 11. You look at 2012 even, and 12 years ago, of course, you'll see that Bob Casey beat Tom Smith by 9 points. And he took down one of my favorite politicians, Rick Santorum, by about 17 in 2006. So you'll see, obviously, that number one, he's been balding for 20 years straight. But beside that, of course, jokes aside, The guy was really strong. He outperformed Obama in 2012 in the state of Pennsylvania, and he held his own in that 2018 midterm election. And so he realistically was seen to be a strong incumbent. So it's all the more humbling and embarrassing for Dave McCormick to have defeated him, basically. And well, you might say, well, this could totally flip. I just don't see it. The remaining votes are certainly going to be more Republican leaning. And by the way, when you look at Dave McCormick, he obviously thinks his victory, of course, to Donald Trump, who's leading Kamala Harris in this official result by 1.8. But over here, obviously, David McCormick only wins by 0.3. So he's underperforming Trump, not as bad as a lot of other candidates. For the record, he did better than Sam Brown. He did better than Kerry Lake. But now, here we have the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania giving the details for the a sensible recount. Now, let's see why it's so embarrassing for Bob Casey to really give this recount the light of day. Because think about it, he's gonna lose no matter what happened. And by the way, Mark Elias, who's like this huge, shadowy Democrat fixer, is going to different states trying to obviously fix the results for the Democrats, my opinion, of course. But Mark Elias is basically felted and dejected when it comes to this race. And the best chance that Casey has is for a recount. Now, listen to why asking for a recount in the first place is such a bad idea, okay?
Of the 4 previous recounts that did occur, the recount confirmed the unofficial outcome each time.
Okay, unofficial outcome, by the way, has Dave McCormick winning. Of the 4 recounts that happened in the past 20 years in the state of Pennsylvania, the person that was in the lead prior to the recount won the election. So at that point, if Casey were to buck the trend, for example, it would be him basically having 4 or 5 to 1 odds of doing so, which doesn't really make sense. So if you flip a coin 4 times and it lands on heads every time, for a 5th time to go a different way, I mean, just think about the odds. Now, this is not fantastic, obviously, for Bob Casey. So this is why I'm very much lapping it up as, even though it's pretty awkward to wait another 11 days for an election result, I still find it all the more satisfying because it seems like unless something very hokey happens, and I don't put anything past the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania, it seems likely that Dave McCormick will win, albeit by a slimmer margin than anticipated a week ago. And that's just how cruddy the elections are nowadays. But now, to be quite honest with y'all, this is somewhat of a scary prospect, but we do have some math here insofar as what votes have already been tabulated. Now, there ought to be about 80,000 ballots remaining, and again, Dave McCormick is in the lead with about 21,700 and something ballots. That being said, though, when you look at the election day votes, for instance, you'll see that 80% of Dave McCormick's total of votes comes from there, if not margin wise. And then obviously mail in votes are more favorable to Casey by about 18 percentage points, which is lower than the 2020 result for Biden, which could have been in the 30s. That being said, when we look at the provisional votes, which again has to do a lot with military people over the seas sending ballots, you'll see that for whatever reason, Bob Casey is ahead there by 0.3%. That being said, of course, not even a percent of each candidate's provisional votes have even been counted yet. These people are taking their eternity in stride, as they've been taking forever to do such a thing as doing their job, counting ballots. But however hard of a job that must be for these guys in Pennsylvania, it seems like you cannot really extrapolate these provisional outlook by, caring too much about it. So even though the Democrat senator in this case has a lead in the provisional vote count, and 60,000 ballots remain that are provisional, again, military overseas people, and 20,000 mail-in votes also, by the way, are remaining, and those will probably crack out for Casey, it still doesn't seem likely that McCormick will lose. Just to be clear, provisional votes, I mean, if you just take 60,000 military ballots in Pennsylvania, virtually everybody in the military is a man. Trump won men by, what, like 8 points or something? So how the hell is Dave McCormick going to lose that vote in total? Doesn't really make sense. And even if he were to lose it, let's say 51 to 49, it would still not be enough for Casey to supplant that 21,000 voter lead that Dave McCormick duly has. And so what this really looks like is that Bob Casey, at best, will go from losing the state Senate seat by 0.3 to maybe 0.25, and that's going to somehow make Daddy proud. Not that he's still around, but still. Rolling in the grave, many people are right now, and are many of the 2020 Biden voters. But to get into other news, Now, let me dunk on CNN for a second, as they're saying right now that they're not going to call the election for Pennsylvania Senate seat. Now, what's so ironic about this, and this is going to be a crossfire with Fox News, is that, people like, again, Fox News 4 years ago called Arizona prior to even, I don't know if the polls didn't close, but it was like several hours early. And you know how close that state was, and they still called it for Joe Biden over Trump. And it's so ironic that we're waiting, again, 10 days out from the election itself, where McCormick was already up, and he's up right now. And there's very few ballots to count at this point, especially given the 7 million votes overall. I mean, for there to be 80,000 is very minuscule, to be clear. Now, for this to be the case, they're still, again, not conceding the race, especially Bob Casey himself. So let's go through his Twitter timeline right now. Okay, you guys are in for a treat. How about a blast from the past and not so distant past, actually? Let's see what Bob Casey said back then in the case of Trump.
16, whenever there's a defeated president or a change in parties, we know that the peaceful transfer of power is a hallmark of our democracy. And he should take the first step, which is concession, and then from there we can have the beginnings of the peaceful transfer of power.
Okay, so there you go. Concession, peaceful transfer of power. Dave McCormick won the popular vote in Pennsylvania to serve the people of Pennsylvania. And this arrogant, again, silver spoon addled person is going to be over here with this lisp and complete utter lack of charisma, by the way. What a more boring person. I feel bad for subjecting you guys to having to listen to the guy for 15 seconds even. But anyway, Bob Casey, this guy has the gall to deny the election results and still beg for a recount, knowing damn well the remaining votes are mostly Republican. And he's going to be over here talking about, and again, as like a 65-year-old man or whatever he is, talking down to Trump like, oh, you allege this, or you're so crazy for a recount. Come on, brother. It's insane. Keep in mind also, there was a scandal a few days ago. Chuck Schumer, who's the majority leader in name only, as obviously John Thune will take over in a few weeks from now, basically he prevented Dave McCormick from being seated at the freshman Senate orientation. This whole rigmarole is for the sake of what exactly? We want our senators to be going through orientation, especially when they don't have elected office prior hand, like Dave McCormick in that case. You want them to know all the little rules of the Senate. You don't want them to get steamrolled by the opposition party. And so, of course, we want every duly elected senator to go through this protocol because it's a very important job. But Chuck Schumer, Charlie, or Chuck in this case, is so malevolent, but also so cynical. He's going to toss Bob Casey a bone and prevent the duly elected senator of Pennsylvania, Dave McCormick, to attend freshman orientation. It's actually pretty palpably disgusting because, again, that is detracting from the service that people will get out of the state of Pennsylvania from their senator by doing so. Now, that attempt has failed, as now McCormick is attending these orientation meetings, but for a few days there, this was all the rage. Alrighty, folks, to wrap up the video, let's go through the timeline for the past few days of cope coming from Bob Casey Jr., lowercase jr. All right. So, November 8th, Pennsylvania is. Should I do it with a lisp, chat? Anyway, Pennsylvania is the birthplace of our democracy, and we must ensure that every voice of every voter from across the Commonwealth is heard in this election. So, very much a Democrat sort of, not euphemism, but trope and empty rhetoric. Again, harkening back to cackling Kamala, coming up with all this sort of platitude nonsense, as done best by Barack Hussein Obama II. Birthplace of democracy. Okay, well, if they're the birthplace of democracy, why don't they count the vote fast like does Texas or does Florida, for instance? Okay, and again, I'm in Arizona, so I have no position to talk, but still, come on. Now, secondly, every voice is heard. What a fake nunnery sort of thing. Okay, if the situation were reversed and David McCormick wanted a recount, damn well Bob Casey wouldn't be like, oh, let's have a recount. Let's let every foreign vote count. No, of course not. Now, the day after, I've said it before and I'll say it now. It's a beautiful day to count every vote. What the hell does that even mean? What a lame sort of post. It's like texting somebody like, do you remember I exist? What a loser. Again, more wine mom sort of like passive aggressive. I don't know what this is. Bob Casey says, "Thank you to the election officials across our Commonwealth who are working diligently over the weekend to ensure Pennsylvanians' voices are heard." Sheesh. He also says the day after, all public service is a trust given in faith and accepted in honor. That's a quote. That's a phrase I live by. I've committed to ensuring that Pennsylvania's voices are heard. How many times are you going to say that exact phrase of voices are heard? We're at 4 times. Okay, let's see if fifth time is a charm. The day after, November 11th, Bob Casey says, our Commonwealth ran a free and fair election, and we are still waiting on the final result. Our election officials will continue counting ballots and ensure Pennsylvania's voices are heard. That is 5 times. If you did a drinking game to this, well, sorry, folks, but you should probably get your keys taken away because you're getting a DUI. I mean, 5 times in a row, 5 shots in the span of 2 minutes. It's crazy. But anyway, this is insane because he's on one hand asking for a recount, which, by the way, basically means that you are denying the official election results, but yet he's going to preface it by saying that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania ran a free and fair election. Well, tell me how that makes sense to anybody, frankly. But anyway, it seems very likely that Dave McCormick will be counted the winner by the time we're eating our Thanksgiving turkey, and I'm going to be grateful that we do have a 53-person Senate for the Republican Party, of course. Dave McCormick is up currently by, again, over 20,000 ballots with 99.5% of the vote counted. So anyways, it's time for Bob Casey to suffer. He sucks. And he needs to go into retirement and just know that his nepotistic ascent to power is now shut down and he's virtually annihilated from politics. And we'd love to see lispy, non-talent having loser like Bob Casey completely eat crow. We'd love to see it, chat. Anyways, I'll see y'all in the next one. If you haven't liked the video, make sure you smash the like button. Subscribe if you want more content. And comment down below what you think of the facial hair. I shaved everything but the mustache. Should it go? We'll see you in the next one. Adios.